Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy that you all can join us today for a coffee with Cap that I'm extremely excited about. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and I hope that we can have an open and great discussion. So let's get going. So first thing, as always, here are a couple of reminders for everybody. We are recording, so please be mindful of your microphone and stay on mute unless you are speaking. This limits the amount of echo and background noise for everybody. However, please do not hesitate to unmute and ask questions or discuss. After all, that's why we're here today. And for the chat check-in, please add your answers to the chat box to share with our group. They are your name, your agency, and what you would like to learn about social media today.
Hey, good morning. This is Megan. I just wanted to share what people are putting here for what they would like to learn about social media. Tips to reduce screen time outside of programs and promoting healthy use. I'd love to learn some tips on how to encourage students to create boundaries around social media. How social media may increase isolation. Rachel said, I would like to learn more about how social media both positively and negatively impact our youth. Wonderful, thank you.
Great, so we will go ahead and move on. So we do want to give a quick overview of CAP and what we do here. So Megan, do you want to do a quick overview?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Nice. I'm the network lead for Colorado Afterschool Partnership, and Kelsey Williams presenting today and put together this wonderful presentation that is our communication leads. So Colorado Afterschool Partnership, or CAP, is one of the 50 statewide afterschool networks funded through the C.S. Mott Foundation. And this network provides Colorado after-school and summer programs access to valuable resources and research used by extended learning programs across the U.S. We work to create partnerships to support the development and sustainability of after-school and summer programs in Colorado. And this is because we know that learning beyond school hours is powerful and important. And we thank you for all that you do for Colorado's family and youth. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Megan. All right, so we will move on and do a quick introduction. So first and foremost, I wanted to give a intro into a little bit of my background. So before joining CAP, I worked directly in the technology industry. I was head of marketing for 3 years for a product engineering firm, meaning that they created new software products both in-house and for major clients. And the technology industry is extremely unique, and it's constantly evolving, sometimes even on a daily basis. And as the marketing manager, I utilized every online platform that you could ever imagine to gather data and build strategies to increase ROI or return on investment. So now when I say online platforms, I mean Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. Every one that you could possibly imagine. Through my time at this tech company, I quickly realized that no one outside the technology industry really knew the technology of social media or online data mining platforms like Google, and nobody knew exactly how they worked if you weren't in technology. It's extremely technical, and if you aren't a software developer or a marketer, why would you really care too much, right? It's a lot of numbers and can get kind of boring quickly. But I got the idea to do this coffee with Cap after sitting down with my family after we watched the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. And they were pretty horrified, and they wanted to know if what was on the documentary was relatively true. And unfortunately, it was. I wanted to make sure that I could help them understand the power of what they were using. And that discussion led me to wanting to share that information with our CAP community. And then this also sparked my own journey into evaluating my family's own use of social media, predominantly my husband and I. And we made a choice to separate ourselves and delete our Facebooks. And overall, I'd say that we are pretty happy with our decision, and I don't plan on getting one anytime soon. I will say that. So. And then the goal of this session is to educate and inspire you to think more critically about how not only you, but youth interacts with social media. We want to give you the tools to evaluate your own personal tech habits so that you can help students do the same. So we will be sharing a list of resources at the end of the session to help you have the same kind of conversations with your kids. So please keep in mind that this topic is huge, right? There are so many factors that encapsulate technology, and can't do a deep dive into every aspect on this topic. For example, we're not going into deep fakes, algorithms, privacy rights, or speech rights in this presentation. I wish we could, I really do, but there's just simply too much information to talk about. So if you do have any questions or wanted to ask a specific thing related to social media or technology, feel free to ask. I will do my best to answer. Keep in mind, I'm not a software developer, so I don't know too much of the back end of that stuff. But before we do dive in, I have a couple of questions. So everybody, please add your answers to the chat box. The first one is, have you ever seen or are you familiar with the film The Social Dilemma? Awesome. I'm seeing some yeses, a couple of no's. Okay. Yeah. So it looks like we have a good mix of some people that are familiar, have seen it, and a couple of who have not. And then my next question is, what do you guys think that social media is for? And that could be a tough question to answer, but try and answer it in a couple of words. What is it for? Filling time, stay in touch with family and friends, share info, marketing, connecting people. I see connection a lot. Okay, great. Yeah. So we'll dive into it. So how does social media work and exactly what is it? So back in the day, this question used to be relatively easy to answer. And it used to be very much centralized around being connected to one another. But as social media grew, the answer became a little bit more complex. These businesses like Facebook had to really dive down and think, how are we going to make money? So we may initially think about social media as a way to connect and stay in touch with family and friends. In fact, the official definition of social media is websites and applications that enable users to create and share content or to participate in social networking. But if we dig a little bit deeper, it's a lot more than that. In the technology industry, certain big companies like Google and Facebook are seen as pioneers or innovators, and people look to them and they set the precedent and often lead the way for other tech companies to follow suit. Case in point is monetization. Or if you're not familiar with what monetization is, it's the process of generating revenue from your audience. And Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, all the logos that you see on the right-hand side, they all have advertisement tools built in. And that's by design, that's by no mistake. So monetization is the driving force behind why these tech companies gather your data and why they design the features that they do. Because the more time you spend interacting with what marketers call paid content, the more money they are able to bring in. So how much money are we talking about here that these companies bring in? We know it's a large amount, but just to see these numbers in front of you on your screen, it can be a little bit different. So these are pretty updated numbers. In 2020, Google's ad revenue amounted to around 146 billion US dollars, or about 75% of its overall revenue. In 2020, Facebook's global revenue was about $84 billion, and that is around 98% of its total revenue. And that's its business model. That business model was created to build that ad revenue. So this is a huge market. I mean, absolutely massive. And it's a huge market that lives relatively unseen behind the curtain of what seems like harmless ads or pieces of promoted content. But these ads or paid content have proven to alter behavior. Even if it's a little bit of behavior here and there, behavior changes in mass populations, it can be huge. And since social media advertising gives anyone the opportunity to reach huge numbers of people in a matter of seconds, we see ad and paid content thousands of times a day, whether we realize it's paid content or not. Sometimes it's hard to spot. So it all comes down to data. The overall function of social media is data gathering. There used to be a saying in marketing that content is king. I was told that hundreds of times as a marketing manager, and it was coined by Mr. Bill Gates himself. But not anymore. That's changed. Data has taken the title of king. There was a recent report that said recently that data, as far as like value, has surpassed oil. To say that we create a lot of data every day is an understatement. And so here's kind of a quick peek at what we create in a single day. 500 million tweets are sent in one day, and 294 billion emails are sent. And 4 petabytes of data are created on Facebook in a single day. And petabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, they're all just measures of unit to track the amount of data. And all of this data, everything that we're doing online is meticulously tracked. It's stored so that marketers can utilize that data to, or governments or special interest groups to advertise. So this is a slide from the World Economic Forum, and I love this slide because it's such a good visual representation of the amount of data that we produce in a day. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to peek around here. If you're not familiar with data units, like petabytes, zettabytes, terabytes, all those bytes, here's a little bit of a representation. And petabytes is right here, and that's a lot of zeros. Yeah, like 95 million photos and videos are shared on Instagram in a single day. Just numbers that are huge.
Kelsey, we have a request for a copy of this document.
Yeah, so yeah, great. We will send out the PowerPoint in an email to everybody probably a couple of days after this presentation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just want to say, whoa.
So big data and social media. Big data, I'm assuming, is a term that not a lot of people have heard. And I'm familiar with big data just because of my work in the technology industry, but everybody should be familiar with this term. You'll hear it quite often in the tech industry, and it's simply the gathering of mass amounts of data that marketers, governments, special interest groups can mine for specific data points. And they're able to better predict behaviors and essentially personalize content for the user based on these data points that they're pulling from big data. So this is actually kind of an interesting case study. You'll see Cambridge Analytica and Facebook down on the down below. And so this is an example of big data colliding with social media in the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook controversy. Cambridge Analytica utilized Facebook data on users to influence the 2016 presidential election, and they did that by catering to users' personal bias. This type of data mining is now essentially, and I'll say this kind of with a grain of salt, it's an accepted practice, but it is frowned upon. Like, if that makes sense. Like, people do it knowingly, but there are some people that it's just accepted. You're able to use these data points to advertise. So this is why we're seeing the alarms being sounded around politics, youth, racial inequality, and the role that social media plays in these topics. They boasted that they had over 5,000 to 6,000 data points on every single user on Facebook. And they were able to manipulate that or use that in presidential election. So crazy stuff. So now we are going to take a little bit of a quick break from the presentation and break into smaller groups to discuss some questions. So please utilize this time to take in what we've just covered. We covered big amounts of data, seeing huge amounts of numbers, and see if the information from what we just talked about changed your understanding or view on social media, and we encourage everyone to engage in conversation during this time. So please unmute, and we will see you guys back in 8 minutes. Megan.
Well, welcome back, everyone.
Yeah. All right. So we want to give everybody kind of a second to, does anybody want to share what they talked about in their breakout room with the rest of the group and any key points that came out of it?
Yeah, so this is James. I think the big thing, I was telling Andre that I work with youth, and the biggest thing that I see that where they're influenced with the social media is just in how they're influenced with their actions. Um, when you're working with teenagers like I work with, it's lots of times there's a lot of negative stuff going back and forth on the social media, such as hey, you should kill yourself, you should get over this, you da 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 da, and that's really a huge point of concern for me.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, that stuff can be pretty heavy, and to hear that from your peers on social media. We do talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. So yes, that's all crazy stuff associated with the social media generation. They're called digital natives because they've now grown up with technology being such a important part of their lives. Like I was telling Megan, I remember when like you had to dial up internet, and I remember when Facebook had just come out and there were no ads. And so I'm not quite that generation Z, but they've had it their entire lives from, being toddlers and holding their phones and being on that kind of stuff. Thefacebook.com. Yeah, exactly. Yep. All right. So we'll move on to
Can I say something real quick on that?
yeah.
Something that recently has come up in our family. My niece who lives in California, we use social media, Facebook specifically, to connect. We're long distance, but we're a really close family. And she had a little girl last spring, and she has chosen to not use social to post pictures of her child because she said, I want her to have the choice of what her online presence will be. And if I'm posting pictures of her when she has no say, how is that good? How is that good for her in her future? And my daughter, who just had a baby on February 1st, is now having to make that decision as well. Don't post pictures, Mom. We don't want to put her on. We don't want her to have her online presence now. We want her to have a choice when she's older as to what she wants that to look like. So it's something I never had to worry about. My kids are all in their 30s and younger, 20, 24. It's really hard to not, as a new grandma, to post pictures of my grandbaby, but I have to honor my daughter's request for that. It's
Yeah.
a scary thing out there, actually.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought that up, Patty. That is something that I'm seeing a lot of folks wanting to hold back, sharing some of that stuff until their children can actively choose, yeah, like you said, Patty, their role in social media rather than having somebody else make that choice. That's a great point. Great. Yeah, it looks like there's some good discussion on the chat board as well. Awesome. Cool. Well, great discussion, everybody. So we'll jump into the next slide. And so now that we know a little bit more about the data and numbers and kind of what social media was designed to do, we can dive into what it actually does to our overall well-being. So the internet has only been around for the last 20 years, 20 odd years, we'll call it. And that's super hard to fathom since it literally dominates every aspect of our everyday life. And while we have some ideas of and studies on how technology affects our overall health and well-being, the fact of the matter is that we really have no idea the long-term effects because it hasn't been around long enough to dive into those. So we have some kind of idea, but it'll be a little bit longer until we can do long-term studies on how social media affects our brain, and we won't know the true lasting effects until much later down the road. And that's just kind of where we're at with it right now. So please keep that in mind as we're kind of going through some of this stuff. But as time goes on, we are uncovering and developing new insights. And that is that there are safety concerns and safety challenges, along with some alarming mental health effects on our young users. And the list of risks is a building one. And here's just a couple of ones that came to mind while doing this research. And I mean, it's a pretty long list already, but it's continuously growing. And like you guys said earlier, there's that risk of cyberbullying and online harassment, and that can get really ugly really fast. But there's also low self-esteem or body image because of what young girls are seeing on Instagram. They're seeing photos of models with perfect faces and bodies, and they want to be like that, even though those images are not real. They are extremely photoshopped or even fake, so we have a distorted view of what's real versus fake. FOMO, I'm not sure if anybody has heard FOMO. It's the fear of missing out, because you see people posting your friends posting at an event that you're not at, and it gives you anxiety because I'm missing out on that. Lack of concentration is a big one, and that's a personal one for me. That's something I saw when I was using social media. It's just my ability to concentrate went out the window. I could not concentrate for more than 50, 60 seconds at a time. And then safety challenges as well. And this has kind of always been in the back of parents' mind when technology and the internet came about. I know a lot of people, you guys are talking about AOL chat rooms, and there's all kinds of stuff like that that's gaining more and more popularity, especially with COVID. There's things like the chat roulette, or I can't, it starts with an O, it's like an omelet, omni something, where you can just get on and it will hook up web cameras anonymously, and you can imagine some weird, yes, Omegle. Maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong, but thank you, Kenny. That's the one I was thinking of. And then, of course, spreading of personal images or messaging, like sexting. That's a big thing that is running rampant in Snapchat, and because the images go away, right? Well, not really. Snapchat stores those images. So yeah, some stuff can. These are just a list. So we will move on to the next slide. So this is a super interesting slide for me because social media and the brain. So how does it actively affect our brain? So according to an article by King University, it's titled "The Psychology of Social Media." They said, from a neurological perspective, social media affects different brain functions in a unique way. It contains many combinations of stimuli that can trigger different reaction, and because of this, social media's effects on the brain appear in various ways. So the VTA is one of the primary parts responsible for determining the reward system in people's bodies and brain. So when social media users receive feedback like the likes or smiley faces or emojis, their brain fires off dopamine receptors, and it gives you this feeling of happiness or euphoria. So outside of the reward system, social media stimuli can affect the brain's decision-making and emotional processing functions. In yet another study that observed the brain activity in adolescents, researchers found that parts of the brain that deal with emotional and sensory processing reacted noticeably when participants felt excluded. So that goes back to the FOMO, fear of missing out. This study highlighted the effects of online social exclusion on the developing brains of adolescents. So what this means is that when social media users were excluded from online groups, chats, events, the brain reacted in specific regions directly. In addition, this is the most interesting part for me that I was completely shocked by. It's been found that the greater your level of Facebook addiction, the lower your brain volume, which is insane to me. So they did an MRI brain scan of Facebook users and they demonstrated a significant reduction in gray matter. So basically what they're saying is they did an MRI scan, and these people who were addicted to Facebook, they had less gray matter. And this is similar to the pruning away of brain matter that they see in cocaine addicts. They were pretty spot on similar, which is crazy to me. And it's important to note too that some teenagers do actually recognize the effects of social media and their overuse, but a lot of them don't necessarily see a need to change their habit just because it's become so much a part of their lifestyle. Here are some more facts and figures. I'm definitely a data person. I was in marketing. So when I see facts and figures like this, it kind of makes you respond a little bit more emotionally. So I wanted to share some of the ones that I found were pretty emotional for me. And so I'll give you a second to kind of read through these. 80% of students mistake sponsored content ads for legitimate news. I think not just students, I think general users, it's hard to determine what is sponsored or what is like promoted because it's in very tiny letters sometimes. And then 30% of 18 to 44-year-olds felt anxious if they hadn't checked Facebook in the past 2 hours. And fake news spread 6 times faster than true news. And this is a interesting one and specifically related to youth is 66% is the increase in the risk of suicide-related outcomes among teen girls who spend more than 5 hours a day on social media. So does anybody have any thoughts on some of these facts and figures or just initial emotional reaction?
It's scary for me with my personal use. Like the thing about the gray matter, I think that's alarming. So I think I'm being selfish and thinking about like, oh gosh, I need to make changes myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking that some of the data and the, information about the impact on the brain would be a good thing to share with youth, so that they understand what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Your last fact there on the bottom, children under age 14,
Mm-hmm.
especially with COVID, I bet those numbers are bigger because we're doing virtual, but that's really sad. That's going to affect our world in the long term. If you've got younger people not having conversation with their family at the same amount of time as they're spending on technology. Kind of blew me away the other day. I saw an under 2-year-old managing her mother's phone to put on like, I don't know, it was okay, appropriate videos. It wasn't, just playing a game online. It was like Mr. Rogers, the little tiger dude from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. She was managing that phone better than I can manage my own, and she's under 2 years old. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Cool. Yeah, some of these are pretty shocking. And at the end, I do have where all of these sources and facts and figures did come from. So you guys, when I shoot out this PowerPoint, you can dive into it a little more. So then it's interesting that you mentioned COVID, Patty. So we actually do have a quick slide on COVID's impact on youth and social media. So there was a report that came out and it's called Are the Kids All Right? And it was conducted by the California Partners Project. And according to this report, in the absence of friends, sports, and other in-person activities that normally filled their days before coronavirus, the thing we heard about most frequently was a deep reliance on social media and gaming. So technology has played an important role in the last year in how we got through it because we were forced to go virtual. But what were the lasting implications of that? Will students and adults alike become more addicted to social media and depend on it for interaction or connection? Because that's all we have right now. Those are questions that we just don't know the answers to quite yet. So in the study that was put on by the California Partner Project, they did take 46 teenagers, ages 14 through 17, that currently live in California, and they had them complete diary responses and documented daily behaviors such as sleep, exercise, internet use, and corresponding mood. And they found 3 or 4 different things. They found that teens are experiencing a tremendous loss due to school closure and social isolation. We kind of already knew that, so that wasn't too much of a shock there. And then the second thing they figured out was there's a limited opportunity to do the work of adolescents and form their identities. So you form your identities by a lot of different ways, and that's by building friendships, being able to talk one-on-one. In-person interactions are much different. You can read body language, eye contact, things like that. And then social media and gaming have become the main way to meet social needs for teenagers right now. And then the fourth final one is the extent of tech use and its impacts aren't obvious, even those closest to the teens. And on top of that, teens also during this time missed out on major milestones like school dances, graduations, getting your driver's license, major sport events, or art performances. So that's all something to keep in mind. So COVID definitely did not help the epidemic there. So this is an interesting photo that I want to share. And this image was shared on Twitter from a teacher. He's also a coach. And this is a virtual representation that shows he just wanted to do an experiment in his own classroom. And so this shows the number of alerts or notifications that students who were both remote and in person received in 42 minutes. It was a 42-minute class, and the total number was over 400. So now we kind of get to the less doom and gloom. Like there's light at the end of the tunnel. There are strategies to have healthier relationships with social media, and but ultimately, what we have to think about too is to do these strategies well. We have to be coming to terms with disconnecting and continuing to educate ourselves on what's out there. So it's hard to disconnect. It's hard to put your phone down for us as adults. But that's, to have healthier relationships, we got to really go for it, and we have to challenge ourselves. So these are some strategies, and we'll get into a little bit of what some of these are in the next slide. But encourage hobbies. This is one that I've had to do for myself this year. I'm like, what can I do that does not involve a screen? And it's harder than I thought it was to think of things. So sports, rock climbing, painting, cooking, working out, whatever we can do to encourage our youth to have hobbies that don't involve a screen. Also, don't look at your phone when you wake up. I used to be in the habit of the first thing I did when I woke up, I got to check my phone. And it just kind of sets your day off to having that mindset of like, oh, what's going on? But if you take a moment in the morning to not check your phone, have your coffee, have a moment, it definitely sets your day up for success. And then the 7-day social media reboot, we'll talk about that in the next slide. This is a fun one too. It's challenge one another to unplug for 24 hours. And that's something that you'll see if you watch the Social Dilemma documentary, is some of the characters, they do some monologue, and it's them challenging one another to unplug for 24 hours. And they didn't realize how hard it was until they did it. And then there's also resources like the data detox kit. We'll talk about that as well. And then my favorite is turning off your notifications for the smartphone. That's a big one. So does anybody have, real quick, any strategies that worked for them or their students that they want to share?
Kelsey, I had a quick question. The whole like getting off your phone for 24 hours, how do you put it in like airplane mode so you could like, how do you still receive calls or if there's an emergency? Have you figured anything
That's a
out to
great
work well for that?
question. No. So when I did the challenge myself, I turned my phone off and I stuck it in the junk drawer of my kitchen, and I just said, "Don't look at it." And that's tough too, because back in the day we had landlines. So if there was an emergency, someone could call the landline. So yeah, that's a tough one if you're thinking about, does somebody have to really get a hold of me? Is there going to be an emergency? I'm sure you could turn off the notifications and put your phone down or put it in silent mode, or don't, put it down in a single space, and you can check it every 2 hours or something like that. But like set limits and just challenge yourself. And that challenge is going to be different for everybody. So,
Or you could give I give my parents my husband's phone number or something like an emergency
There
contact.
you go. Yeah.
yeah, that's a great way of doing it too. Mm-hmm.
Audrey, you also shared that about getting a puzzle game to do while you're sitting in, was that you? Yeah. Doing a puzzle game while sitting on the couch because you were on the phone. And I did want to say one thing I've heard is that if you're taking something away, like it's good to have a plan for what you're going to replace it with. Right. And so like you were talking about sports and painting and cooking or a puzzle game or something else to do in place of it, because when you have that habit, you're going to you're looking for it to keep you entertained. And then also Kelsey, Adam shared, I turned off notifications for all social media and news for a few weeks before purging. And you do that with your settings. That's right. You can do that.
Awesome. Mm-hmm.
Patty crochets. There you go. That keeps your hands busy. You can't
Yes.
text while you're crocheting.
Exactly. Yeah, these are all good suggestions. I like them. It's always interesting to hear what other people do too. Set time limits on your apps too. Awesome. Yeah, so this is probably one of my favorite slides of the presentation, because you can utilize technology for good. It doesn't always have to be bad. There are tools out there to help you. There's a lot of online resources that can help you make sure your kids are educated on the powers of technology and help you navigate to the best of their abilities. And some of these, I will share these as well. The commonsense.org. This is really cool because it gives you kind of like digital lesson plan for talking to kids from kindergarten to third grade, all the way up to seniors in high school, how to talk to them and educate them on technology and how they use it. Like, how do you turn off your tracking location? It's hard. It's not easy to find. So it kind of gives you lesson plans to go through and talk to students about that. And it's very interactive, but also good stuff to know. And so then the social dilemma, the social media reboot, it's basically you are pledging to do specific things, like I'm going to turn off my notifications and I pledge to do that. So I highly suggest that you check out the social media reboot on the social dilemma. And then there's also a family media agreement on commonsensemedia.org. So it's being able to sit down with your own kids or your students, or even giving parents the opportunity, like, hey, we have this resource for you if you're noticing this is becoming a problem. And then social truth, that one's super impactful. Reading some of the stories, I didn't read too many because it was pretty heartbreaking, but social truth it's a hashtag, and you can go to this site and read some of what teens are dealing with social media, and they are just open and honest, and it's pretty incredible. And if you have students of your own that want to share their own stories, this is a great place to do it. It gives them a community where they can talk about what social media looks like in their everyday life and how they interact with it. And then the data detox kit. This one's just plain fun. It's kind of like Zen. It's like a little spa website. So I definitely recommend you check that one out. It arms you with a lot of information. That's really great. So check that out. And we will send these resources out. So don't worry, we'll get them over to you guys. So in conclusion, we're about to wrap up. We hope that this session was not only informative, but gives you a better idea of the overall workings of something that is very prevalent in our everyday lives. By better understanding how social media works and affects us, we can become better equipped to help youth navigate social media in a healthier way, not only youth, but ourselves as well. My ask is that our community continues to educate ourselves on technology and its inner workings. Technology needs to be ethically designed, tested, and regulated. The people who design this kind of technology are essentially software engineers and marketers, so they don't always have that in the back of their mind. And I'm not saying they design it with malicious intent, it's just they're a software engineer and they're going to design it to make it do its job. So we need to speak up on how we want technology created in the future. So that kind of encapsulates the presentation. So we are done with the social media side. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about in conclusion is just a little bit more about the upcoming events that CAP has going on. So we are offering a professional development series, and there's a couple of different sessions here that I wanted to share with you guys in case that sparks any interest. And then just ways to get involved with CAP. You can join our newsletter and follow us on social media right there. It is a good way to keep up with your communities, but be responsible with it. All right. So
Thank you,
here
Kelsey.
are, yeah, no problem. And here are some of the sources that I used to pull for this presentation. I think it's, I was an English major, so it's important for me to put my sources in there, just so you know where this information came from.
I'm going to put a link in the chat box for the upcoming professional development series. We do have one this Thursday, Strategies for Engaging and Supporting LGBTQ plus youth during out of school time learning. So we'll hope you join us.
Yeah. And I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Kelsey, I have to say the timing of this could not have been better for me. Tomorrow, I am doing 2 presentations at our local high school. I work School to Work Alliance program, and my presentation is your online presence. And it's regarding social media and the use in how it can affect your future employment. And so I've got a lot of the information that you've kind of talked about in here, but you've given me some extra resources. I'm going to have to adapt my presentation for it because you've added some things for me to think about, and I appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
Oh, absolutely, Patty. Yeah, thank you. Best of luck on your presentation. And
Thanks.
yeah, don't be afraid to reach out if you I'll shoot over these resources so you have them. And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions that we can help you with.
I did find a really great YouTube video of a young lady who's an influencer, and she talks about using social media as to help with your own personal brand. So, and she talks about it in a way that is appropriate for youth and how you're putting yourself out there. So, and how it affects you for future employers and stuff. So, I really appreciate your information. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining. All right, have a good one, everybody.